Do you remember this fish? This is Marlin, the father of Nemo. For most of you, it'll most likely be quite a while ago since you've last seen the movie, but still, you will probably have an easier time remembering Finding Nemo than you will this other story I want to talk about. The myth of Demeter and Persephone. You see, these two stories have a lot in common, more than you might expect, and there's a good reason for that. They both contain an archetypical phenomenon that is part of human nature. These two characters, even though they were written thousands of years apart, both hold a dark character trait that is easily overlooked, but rarely forgotten in literature. And not only that, it just so happens that this trait often manifests in the same personality type, the ISFJ. ISFJs are often categorized as the nicest type in the world, and apparently, most likely to be both your mother and grandmother. Most ISFJs in fiction aren't protagonists though. Usually they are caring sidekicks and characters that help the protagonist find their way. They often are a guiding light, a friend, and in rare cases a mentor. An important role, but one that doesn't do them justice as flashed out people. Samwise Gamgee from The Lord of the Rings, for example, doesn't have a bad bone in his body. Same goes for Neville Longbottom and characters like Baymax. They aren't quite Mary Sue's, but they are often portrayed as morally pure. Being the nice guy can be great, but having such a strong, caring nature can also come at a very high price in real life. One that Marlin and Demeter both learn to pay fairly quickly in their respective stories, making them some of the few characters in fiction that portray a realistic downside to caring about others in the way ISFJs often do. Let's start by refreshing our memory of Demeter. As some of you might remember, she's the Greek goddess of agriculture, fertility, and everything related to it. Demeter also had a daughter, and a beautiful one at that. Her name was Persephone, and Demeter loved her very, very much. So much so that Demeter did what ISFJs do best: tend to the needs of her loved ones to extreme lengths. This is due to the ISFJ's dominant function, SI, introverted sensing, which, according to socionics, deals with physical needs and comfort. It is also strongly related to stability and keeping things the way they are, which can manifest in many different ways. ISFJs see the world as a collection of sensory inputs and try to deal with those inputs through FE, extroverted feeling. ISFJs take care of themselves and others through expressing their own emotions and convincing others to make the right and safe decisions. This can be achieved in multiple ways. For example, a more immoral ISFJ could lie and manipulate others so that they will make a specific choice, but because lying to the ones you love often feels wrong, they usually go for a different approach. Like Marlin, they will often simply try to convince the person they care about to listen to them.
Let's see. Are you sure you want to go to school this year? Because there's no problem if you don't. You can wait 5 or 6 years.
Come on, Dad. It's time for school.
It's no wonder the MBTI community types ISFJs as your mother and grandmother, because those are typically the people in one's life that take that role upon themselves. Your parents are usually the ones telling you what is safe and what isn't.
Dad, can I go play too? Can I?
I would feel better if you go play over on the sponge beds. That's where I would play.
Unbeknownst to Demeter, however, plans were being made by Persephone's father Zeus, ruler of the gods, to give Demeter's daughter to Hades, god of the underworld, to become his bride. Because the gods knew how much Demeter tried to keep her beautiful daughter Persephone close to her, they knew she would never let her marry Hades, so they did what everyone would do in that situation. Simply abduct her and take her to the underworld anyways. Now, I know what you might be thinking. How does that have anything to do with Demeter being an ISFJ? Isn't this just Hades and Zeus being inconsiderate? Well, yes and no, because the situation partly unfolded because Demeter was so clingy and caring for Persephone. You see, if Zeus would have known Demeter was reasonable enough to consider such a marriage, she might have had more say in it. Maybe she could have used her FE to convince Zeus not to take her daughter away. It's a stretch, I know, but there is even more reason to believe Demeter's personality had to do with this conflict, because in some versions of the story, Persephone goes willingly. Yes, you've heard that right. In multiple versions of the story, Persephone willingly marries the god of the underworld without her mother's permission and leaves with Hades without any resistance. Now that must say something about the way Demeter treated Persephone. She loved her, no question, but could it have been that her controlling love for her daughter was what drove her away in the end? If someone feels trapped, they might take the first chance they get to learn what freedom tastes like. That is what I believe happened to Persephone too. Now if you get rid of all the gods and flower picking, the basis of this story applies perfectly to finding Nemo as well. Marlin knows the dangers of the ocean and tries to keep his only surviving child from leaving the safety of the anemone, which in the end causes Nemo to take the risk that he takes.
Don't touch the Nemo!
Because Nemo never faced real danger, he needs to prove himself, a mistake that takes a movie of more than 1.5 hours to fix. Not being able to keep their loved ones safe has a devastating impact on the ISFJ. Because they value this aspect of life to such great lengths, it's no wonder that Demeter, goddess of agriculture I remind you, let the world turn into an unfertile wasteland in order to get Persephone back. Demeter no longer tended to the needs of the earth, which causes great distress. Zeus was furious, and that was exactly what Demeter wanted. Her plan worked and Hades was forced to give Persephone back. The only problem was, Persephone had already consumed seeds of the pomegranate in the underworld, which meant that she was bound to the place. Pomegranates, by the way, were often a symbol of fertility, and as Persephone consumed the seeds specifically, I think you get what I'm trying to say. Because of this problem though, they struck a deal with Hades. Persephone only stays in the underworld for half of the year, which sets in motion the cycle of the seasons. When Persephone is with us, the spring begins, and when she leaves, the leaves start to fall once again. Demeter never truly recovers from this annual loss apparently, otherwise we wouldn't have seasons. Maybe that's what climate change is, Demeter slowly dealing with the fact that she can't keep her daughter with her at all times, and it isn't too bad to let her go sometimes. Okay, no, but that is what Marlin does learn at the end of finding Nemo. At some point you have to let loose a little. By doing this, he gave Nemo the freedom to learn from his own mistakes and make the transition towards a stronger and more independent self. So then, is that it? Is that really the worst an ISFJ can become? Becoming a little too caring? That's not too bad then, is it? Well, not exactly, because even though this concept of helicopter parenting seems to be limited in this sense, the reasoning behind the behavior isn't. Why do most helicopter parents do what they do? Well, that's because they believe that they can influence the variables of life if they put enough time and effort in it. They believe every problem could have been evaded if only enough limitations were put in place, if only there was enough supervision, if only there was enough information provided, if only there was someone that did all those things so that the pain and suffering wouldn't have occurred in the first place. Sometimes they are that person. Sometimes they take it upon themselves and try to take control over things they don't have control over and never ever will. Take the character of Emma Pillsbury for example. It's no wonder they made a character with OCD and SI dominant user. Same goes for Alex in The Road Within, and yes, I'm really going there, Twilight Sparkle from My Little Pony. They are both ISTJs, I am aware, but therefore have SI as their dominant function as well, and curiously enough also have an obsessive compulsive disorder. OCD is one step above the helicopter parent because where those types of ISFJs can learn to let go through experience, people with OCD have less of a choice in the matter. There appears to be a strong correlation between one of the big 5 categories, openness to experience, and OCD-like behavior. People with such a disorder often score lower in that category. Openness to experience is the big 5 equivalent of the S or N dichotomy in MBTI, which suggests that people with OCD are more likely to be S-types. Some researchers state that personality theory doesn't apply to non-neurotypical people at all because they are, well, non-neurotypical, but I beg to differ. Whilst disorders aren't bound to specific personality types, the chance that someone with ADHD scores higher on the perceiving end of the spectrum is no surprise. It's also perfectly reasonable to assume someone with social anxiety or autism is more likely to score higher in introversion than their neurotypical counterparts. Because we can draw simple conclusions like these, I'd say it's safe to assume that the correlation between OCD-like behavior and SI dominance is valid. It's easy to see how this could manifest in ISFJs, even if they don't suffer from the actual disorder. Their third function, according to socionics, is introverted intuition. That is the function they rely on when their first two do not suffice. NI deals with the linear passage of time and the logical sequence of events which can easily go haywire in stressful situations. This is perfectly demonstrated in this scene, where Emma Pillsbury panics about her wedding.
Fine doesn't mean that he didn't like the centerpiece.
I need things to be more than fine.
Okay, I need them to be perfect. They have to be perfect, and I need them to be perfect.
Look, I think you're just putting too much into this.
No, I'm not, because the last time with Carl, I let go. I did that already. You know, I said that details wouldn't matter, that my OCD wouldn't get in the way, that whatever would happen, and that marriage was completely ruined before it even began.
Maybe Carl just wasn't the right guy.
This isn't right. I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't get married again. I can't do it again if it's not right.
Miss Pillsbury, please.
What about the color white? What if Will hates the color white all of a sudden? He's gonna hate my dress. And then
This scene is so helpful for illustrating the ISFJ's stressful side because it's perfectly clear why she is panicking. It isn't necessary, but for her it is. She strives for an unachievable level of perfection for her wedding, and to justify it, she takes the linear perception of time and takes wrongful conclusions about it. Last time she tried to marry, she didn't believe everything had to be perfect, and that marriage ended before it even began. Therefore this wedding has to be perfect, otherwise it'll suffer the same fate. This is a problematic way of thinking because drastic situational differences aren't taken into account. For the ISFJ, this is logical, but for people with higher dimensional introverted intuition, this mistake seems delusional. Through this, it might become apparent how this part of the ISFJ can exceed the caring aspect of their inner selves. Yes, being overprotective is bad, but this behavior can have devastating effects too, possibly even worse ones. In the story, Emma experiences stress on many occasions, often ending with her just fleeing the scene or ignoring the problem altogether, and usually this doesn't just backfire on her, but also on the people involved. Not only does she turn her own life upside down, she flips it around for everyone. This lack of consideration is also partially due to the ISFJ's underdeveloped extroverted intuition. They have trouble seeing the interconnectedness of their actions to the rest of their life and the lives of others, making them easier to overwhelm when things don't go the way they usually go. Oftentimes it seems like the only way to stop an ISFJ from fleeing is to make them aware of the consequences it'll have on the ones they love. They need to realize that running away will do more harm than having a less than perfect wedding, regardless of how that might be for them to believe. Only then can they take a step back and breathe. If they then revise their decisions after it is all blown over, they can create new memories that favour a more calm approach to stressful situations. Who knew that a show about a high school singing group would ever come in handy when explaining personality theory to thousands of people on the internet? I sure didn't. So, is that it then? The worst an ISFJ can become? Someone that runs away and wreaks havoc through their inconsiderate behaviour? No, it isn't. It can still get worse, you see. All these previous examples had one thing in common. None of the ISFJs did anything with bad intentions. They may have hurt people through their actions, but they have yet to make decisions with a desired evil result. Someone might get hurt when they run away, some child might grow up with low self-esteem because of their helicopter parenting, but that is usually not the ISFJ's intended result. That doesn't mean they can't have morally questionable intentions. In fact, that is what set in motion what is often considered the biggest genocide in history, the Holocaust. You see, Heinrich Himmler, the Reichsführer of the SS, short for Schutzstaffel, was an ISFJ too. He grew up as the son of a royal tutor and had a bright future ahead of him, or so it seemed at the time. Like I explained in the INFJ video, Germany was about to go to war and lose, big time, which completely destroyed Himmler's future. He saw his beloved Germany fall apart. As you can imagine, this really dysregulated the ISFJ's stability-centered worldview. Himmler wrote that he was not going to stay in Germany and watch it fall apart. He was ready to migrate. He considered countries like Peru, Spain or Ukraine, but he was certain he wouldn't be in Germany anymore. This behavior is similar to that which we've talked about before. Himmler was ready to Pillsbury himself out of Germany because things weren't as stable as he desired them to be. He didn't leave though, because in a year's time Hitler's party started to gain popularity. After being inspired by one of Hitler's speeches, he joined the NSDAP, the Nazi party. He took a job within the party that consisted of him driving around and speeching against communists and Jews. This is a similar bad use of extroverted feeling we've seen with INFJs as well, only their worldview differs greatly. Where the INFJ would want to persuade others to follow them to a new future, the ISFJ will want to persuade others to enforce stability. Himmler hated the communists and Jews because he believed they were the cause of the disruption in his country. For him, they ruined the Germany he remembered. In fact, this urge for preservation was so strong in Himmler that he made sure that he implemented rules that stated his soldiers needed to make children before going into battle. Women that refused to lay with their men were charged with treason, and men were encouraged to be polygamous to ensure they would make as many children as possible. This controlling behavior is helicopter parenting on steroids. Instead of concerning himself with the well-being of his close friends or family, he, in his eyes, tried to protect an entire race. One of the crucial reasons Himmler wasn't stopped was because the people close to him were with him. Hitler stood above him and fully approved of the plan to kill millions of people, and so did Hitler's other close advisors and generals. In the eyes of an ISFJ, he was restoring greatness and stability. His role was one of a caring father, tending to the needs of his eye and children, so to speak. If the dominant functions of an ISFJ, SI and FE, are unchallenged, there's no reason to morally reconsider. Due to the fact that FI, the function in charge of morality, is developed but underappreciated within the ISFJ's psyche. It's okay because we believe it's okay. This is an archetype that returns fairly frequently in history and literature. Modern fictional adaptations of this behavior, like in Zootopia, out of all movies, is often compared with Hitler, but in this case that is a false comparison. Hitler convinced large groups of people to fight alongside him for a glorious future, but Dawn Bellwether operates behind the scenes, just like Himmler. The caring sheep that could do no harm turns out to be the puppet master of the most horrific deeds. Society's helicopter parent that only wants the best for her children turns out to call the shots in a gruesome, literal sense. It is for this reason that intention isn't widely accepted as a defining factor for moral purity. Does a good intention outweigh the destructive consequences of helicopter parenting? Does a good intention make up for the devastating effect that being over-controlling can have on others? Does it matter that Himmler wholeheartedly believed he was acting for the greater good? I don't think most of you will hold that opinion, but we're ready to advocate for morality through intention. Let us therefore remember to always take into consideration not only the intention, but also the consequences of our actions. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, subscribing and commenting. I try to reply to everyone, and since we've hit 200 subscribers, I'm very, very happy. This proves to me that there is plenty of people that are interested in this type of content, and it helps me stay motivated to keep making more of these videos. So hopefully see you next time.